What's up, everybody? It's your boy with another installment in the r/LetsNotMeet series. Now, to those who are new, which is a lot of you guys, if you're not familiar with this no commentary story style, usually I make these videos for individuals who like to listen to my stuff while they're, playing video games, drawing, eating, or trying to go to sleep. So if that's not you and you just want to listen to my regular commentary style when it comes to Reddit videos, go ahead and check out the eye icon to the top right hand corner. There's a plenty of playlists there for you to choose and enjoy. So let's jump right into these stories. So, I was around 7 at the time, and it was summer of 2011. I live in a pretty small village in France where everyone knows each other and everyone trusts each other. My parents were working all afternoon, and before going to work, they would drop me and my little sister at our grandparents' house, which was 20 minutes walk away from where I lived, and our cousin would also join us so we could play, watch movies, etc. It was the summer vacation, and as usually, with my cousin and sister, which were both 3 years younger than me, we took our bikes and went out to ride where our grandparents were living. There was a field very near we would always go, and there was a large place in front of that just served as a parking lot for the houses nearby, so the place wasn't isolated. We had the order to get back home around 8 p.m. from our grandma because it was the time where our parents would come fetch us. While we were at the place, I remembered there was a woman playing with her son in front of the house with a water gun, and a red car parked in front of her house. I know this car wasn't from someone else's house because I knew the village very well, but I thought nothing of it. There was a guy sitting in the car all the time when we were there with our bike, and it was the only thing that I thought was weird. So anyway, after we finished eating around 7 p.m., we begged our grandma to go out riding our bikes again, and after lots of hugs and negotiations, she accepted, but told us to be careful because it was getting dark and not to follow or accept anything from a stranger. So we went out again, and we go back to where we had been all afternoon before, only my cousin and little sister and me. I'm going to be honest here, but for some reason I was so nervous that my stomach was hurting, and I was almost crying. I didn't know why at the time, and I thought I was afraid of vomiting because my stomach was hurting so bad, and that's why I was nervous. But because when I was at that age, vomit was my absolute phobia. Now that I'm older, I can only think that what I was feeling was actually anxiety. So, while my sister and cousin were talking and riding together, I was just sitting on my bike trying not to cry and watching them. We stood there for a long time, and usually we didn't watch the hour. My grandma was used to us coming back late though, so we would get scolded every time. Then the red car appeared again, except this time there was 3 guys in it, and they had lots of muscles, and they seemed to be in their 30s. They stopped my little sister and cousin, and being the older one, I quickly approached to see what they wanted. And I was, and still am, a really shy person. So I didn't tell them to leave us alone, because at that point, something was just off, and I wanted them to leave. The red car stops, and the guy that was sitting behind goes out, all smiling and appearing innocent. He told us, "Hey, I know where you live. We can ride you home," with the voice of an adult trying to talk like a baby. First big red flag. I politely tell them, "No, we're fine," and we're about to go back to our grandparents' house anyway. He immediately became angry. Second big red flag. He told us that he knew our grandparents and that he was there to bring us back to him. At that point, I was thinking, why would he bring us back in his car while the house is literally like 5 minutes away? I asked him how he could even bring us if we had bikes, and beside, there was only 2 seats free in the car. He became even more angry and told us to just get in the car, she'll go on my knees, showing my little sister, who was very short at the time. At that point, I really didn't know. I'm both thinking that maybe it's true and he's just being impatient because we were already late and maybe he had something else to do after bringing us back, but at the same time, I just have the word run in my head. So luckily this ends well because it turns out we were late a lot and our grandma had sent our grandpa to come get us. And when he arrived, he asked the guy what they were doing, and they just answered that they were checking up on how we were, and they began to leave. I told my grandpa what had happened, and I can promise you've never seen him so enraged before. He called them all the insults of the world and called the police right when we got home. That's when 7-year-old me understood what was going on, and I was terrified of it going out for so long. And now it's okay, but I'm still so anxious about being outside, even with someone I know. Sadly, I don't know what happened next. I don't know if those guys were ever found, and I don't know if they tried kidnapping other kids. I don't know anything. So for those 3 suspicious guys in the red car in France on a summer evening in July 2011, let's not meet ever again. Okay, so this is pretty anticlimactic, but it still gives me the creeps. At the time of writing, I'm 16, female, and this happened to me when I was 9 till I was 14 years old. When I was in primary school, 4 years old to 11 years old, I had a best friend, Marie. Marie's parents were split up and her father lived on the same street as me, whilst her mother lived in a town over. She spent the week with her mom, and weekends with her father. I would often go to his house to play with Marie. We'd play hide and seek and pretend and other games like that. Marie wasn't exactly the best child, and her play fights left me with scratches and bruises. Her father spoiled her and always had sweets and money in the house. He was always on dating sites or Facebook and was an avid Arsenal fan, watching every single game. In the summer, if I was playing in the garden, I could hear him shouting at his TV because of a match outcome or a goal. He would take me and Marie out to buy us McDonald's and once a pillow pet because I wanted one so badly. I remember my mom being kind of weirded out when I said that Marie's dad bought it for me. He would take us swimming too, but I don't remember much of those trips. Marie's father was around 5'11", stocky with a bald head and ears that stuck out. He had a very kind smile and was soft-spoken with a very deep voice. I used to walk home from school, and he would often wave out of his upstairs bedroom window down at me, and I would wave back and smile or say hi, and he'd return it. The summer of me being 10, I was over at their house almost every weekend, and when I was 11, Marie moved in with her mother to the seaside town, and we went to 2 different secondary schools, and I lost touch with Marie and never really hung out with her again. I need to lay out how my route home is for the next bit to make sense, and I'm really sorry if this is confusing. My road is like an L, with the longer part being a crappy tarmac road and the shorter part is up a hill. I could walk up this road to my house that is on top of the hill. The houses are like a T, with the row of terraced houses along the top of the hill and another row going down the hill along the road. The backs of the houses face the road and the alleyway leads around to the front of the houses, and I could also walk along this alley to get to my house. Literally whichever way I took to my house, Marie's father would see me as he lived around halfway up the hill in the row of the terraced houses that went down the hill next to the road. When I'm in my room at home, with the blinds up, I can see Marie's father's house. Let's call Marie's father Ken. Ken would open his window and lean out and watch me from his window. It would take me a few minutes to notice him watching me as my bed is right next to the window, and I'd often be in my pajamas or minimal clothing. I would wave or smile and he would cheerily wave back. I would close my blind and wait a couple of minutes before opening it and he would be gone. This happened multiple times, and my mother put a net curtain for me so that nobody could see my window, and I could change my sheets at night, and I often do it in my underwear, as my bed is in a weird position and changing sheets required a lot of effort. I have to sit on my windowsill, so I would often have to remove the net curtain, and I have no idea how many times he's watched me contort and struggle to change my sheets, bearing in mind I was around 13 or 14 when I began noticing these things. I walk home from my bus stop the same way I'd walk from my primary school, and every single way I would take to walk home, Ken would always notice me. He would always wave hello or smile like he was expecting me or something. It seriously creeped me out, and I began to get scared to see him. My heart would race, and I would begin to completely ignore him as I walked home, headphones on my ears blasting music. I thought he was watching me, waiting for me, every day, and one day when I was 14, I tested my theory. There were 2 ways I could walk past Ken's house. Both would lead me home. The first way was the way I usually walked, along the tarmac road and up to my back garden. It passed the back of his house. However, from the bottom of the hill, I would be able to see his window and see if he was still waiting for me, and I could divert my route to go around the front of his house and along the alleyway and then up the hill and into my front door instead of my back. One day I saw him in the window at the back of his house, and I tried not to get off that I knew that he was watching me. Without stopping on my route, I diverted to walk up the alley in front of his house. He crossed along the top floor of his house, and when I reached his house some way up the hill, he was looking down at me from the window at the front of his house. He was definitely watching me. I power walked home and immediately dug up Marie's contact info. I told her to tell Ken to stop watching me walk home, and I thought it was creepy. She did so and told me that Ken was only waiting for his girlfriend to get home and that he always watched for her. I can hear every car on my street pull up from my house, and I never heard any the hour after I got home. I know Ken's girlfriend drives a BMW, and I know what it sounds like. Luckily, he stopped watching me after that, and I've never really seen him again. So Ken, let's not meet again. I was one of those kids you see walking around zoos or amusement parks wearing a leash. Those were already a thing 20 plus years ago, but less common, and they were initially only tied around the wrist. In my case, it was a necessity. I was always wandering away from the rest of my family, no matter what situation. This is one of the stories that led to me earning my leash. It happened when I was about 6 years old, and I went to the zoo with my mom and sisters. Before every family outing, my mom made sure to give me the talk about not walking off again or face the consequences. My mom was a strict parent, and that made me good on her promises. She had to, being a single mother of 3. I didn't try to disobey her per se, but I often just didn't pay attention to the world and the people around me. No different this day. I behaved and followed the group for a while, but then a butterfly garden caught my attention and off I was. When I finally realized I separated myself from my mom and sisters again, I panicked and started walking around the zoo looking for them. Being afraid of my mom's reaction more than anything else, after a while I somehow got it in my head that if I could just walk out and find our car and wait there, my family would eventually find me. So I did. I got lost within a couple of minutes, walking around a strange neighborhood looking for either our car or the way back to the zoo. Nothing looked familiar, and I started crying. My mom was gonna be so mad at me. Then this man came up to me, just normal looking, about 40 years old, asking me if I was lost. I explained I lost my family when we were visiting the zoo, and I was looking for a way back. I couldn't believe my luck when the man told me he had just come from the zoo and saw a family standing near the entrance who were looking for a little girl with blonde hair and a baseball cap. But it was still a few blocks away, so he proposed I'd walk with him to his car and we could drive the rest of the way back. Just him mentioning his car made me feel really hesitant. I told him I wasn't allowed to get in the car with strangers. My mom would be so mad. He then said something like, "That's true," but I looked smart enough to know that I could trust someone. Don't remember the exact words, but it was something like that. Also, he added, he spoke to my parents earlier when they were looking for me, so he's not a complete stranger. That didn't seem right. I asked him if he really talked to my dad, who had died a year before, and he said that he did, and I broke down crying uncontrollably. I still don't understand the situation I was in, and I was really confused about everything and scared of how angry my mom was going to be after all of this. Finally, my crying caught the attention of a security guard in the parking lot building we were standing next to, asking if there was something he could help with. The guy stepped aside with the security guard and started explaining the situation, but made it vaguely sound like he was my father and we were looking for his wife. The security guard seemed to believe him, pointing us in the right direction towards the zoo. The man thanks the security guard and proceeds to take my hand to walk away. The security guard takes a last look at me and asks me, in a comforting, friendly adult-to-child kind of way, why I'm still crying. I tell him that my dad is dead, and he looks really confused for a few seconds and then asks if this man was not my dad. I tell him again, no, my dad is dead. In a split second, his whole face and posture changes, and he turns to look at the guy, who's trying to explain he never actually said he was my dad, that the security guard must have misunderstood, and that he was just helping me find my mom. The security guard said that he appreciated the man's help, but he would take me off of his hands now, and the guy immediately took off. I don't think that there was much the security guard could have done. I explained the whole situation, and after making a phone call, he walked me to the entrance of the zoo, which was just around the corner of the parking lot building. And from there, we went to the security office, where my mom and sisters were already waiting. I feel extremely lucky for the security guard being there at the right place and the right time of the day, and I was very grateful for the extra second of time he took that could have made all of the difference. What's up, everybody? It's your boy Ailurus, and I hope you enjoyed the third installment in Ailurus' Spooky Week. I know we've been putting out some serious fire content this week, and I hope you enjoyed Let's Not Meet. If you want to request any other subreddits or spooky subreddits, let me know in the comments down below. If you want to request any horror stories content, let me know in the comments down below. Speaking of horror stories content, tomorrow is going to probably be the most extreme horror story I've ever done. I saved it up for October 31st. There will be a warning before the video, not just a text warning. It's going to be a complete auditory warning, you know, all of that, letting you know what is going on in that video, because it's pretty out there. It's extreme. But I chose it because that's the whole point of the horror stories videos, is that I'm talking about real life events that happened. They're not, you know, fake. It's nothing for fun. None of that. This actually occurred. So yeah, I'm just letting you know now. And again, there will be a warning before the video so that individuals who don't necessarily want to watch it don't have to. And as always, we got to thank the Patreon supporters. So thank you to Finny, Pro Cookie, Mia, Lucy, and Unholy Trio. Thank you so much for your support. It's greatly appreciated. And if you want to help support the channel in any way, there's 2 links in the description, one in my merch store and one in my Patreon. Both funds go directly to the channel to make sure we can maintain what's happening here. And as always, stay zesty.